When three aggressors cornered Rylan behind the gymnasium, they anticipated terror, yet in mere moments, one was sprawling on the asphalt, and the others discovered precisely what it signified to provoke the wrong individual. Hardly a soul registered the moment Rylan Croft passed through the main entrance of Northwood High in Crestwood, Ohio. No grand reception, no murmurs of intrigue, simply one more transfer student arriving in the middle of the term. His book bag showed its age, his sweatshirt was bleached by time, and he moved with a deliberate sort of stillness, the way a person does when they have learned to assess their surroundings long before uttering a single word. It was a frigid Monday, icy slush still clung to the edges of the pavement, and the morning bell echoed with a piercing clarity down the corridors. Rylan paused by his locker, his gaze sweeping over the stream of names and faces that rushed by him. He wasn't afraid, he simply understood the drill: find your classrooms, avoid making waves, remain invisible. Inside his first period algebra class, a handful of students cast a glance his way as he entered. A girl in the far corner murmured something from behind her cupped hand. The teacher offered a brief smile, gestured to a vacant desk toward the rear, and continued the lesson. No formal introduction, no hint of curiosity, only silence. Rylan was untroubled by it. He had learned that silence was not inherently negative. Back in Ridgeway, where he hailed from, it was often a synonym for safety. He didn't wear expensive apparel, he never flaunted himself intentionally. His uncle called it navigating unseen, a skill you acquired in particular neighborhoods where drawing attention could lead to a beating, or something far worse. But Northwood High was a different world from Ridgeway. It was immaculate, the students were draped in designer brands, their hairstyles looked professionally sculpted, their laughter boomed with an easy confidence, and they glided as if they owned the very ground beneath their feet. No one spoke to Rylan directly, but he observed the way some of them assessed his worn shoes, how a boy in physical education eyed his second-hand sweatshirt as if it were contaminated. On his third day, he ate his lunch in solitude, at a table near the rear of the bustling cafeteria, a tray holding spaghetti, a banana, and a carton of chocolate milk. Simple, quiet. He chewed methodically, observing, listening. And that was when the laugh cut through the noise. "Hey, what is that supposed to be? Did you pack that from your house or something?" Rylan lifted his head. A tall, fair-haired boy in a varsity jacket was standing a few feet from him, a smirk playing on his lips. This was Dexter Corbin, football co-captain, star athlete, and the self-proclaimed ruler of the junior class. He was flanked by two other boys, both of them grinning as if they shared a secret joke. Rylan offered no reply. "The guy eats like we're in the Great Depression," Dexter announced, his voice loud enough for the adjacent tables to overhear. A ripple of laughter followed. Not everyone joined, but enough did. Rylan continued eating, his gaze fixed downward. He had no desire for conflict, not at this moment. One of Dexter's companions, a shorter kid with a buzz cut, leaned close. "Did you hear me, buddy? Are you hearing impaired or just dense?" Rylan looked at him, just for an instant. Then he blinked, picked up his milk, and rose to his feet. "I'm finished." He walked away. No retorts, no dramatic exit, just left his tray and headed for the hallway. But it wasn't over. Later that afternoon, someone swept his books from his desk during science class. Nobody took credit, the teacher failed to see it. Then, after the final bell, someone had scrawled, "Welfare case," in erasable marker across the front of his locker. It came off easily, but it left an impression. Rylan went home without a word that evening, riding the number 12 bus to the outskirts of town, where his uncle's gym was tucked away behind a tire depot. Inside, the aroma of perspiration and worn leather greeted him before the bell above the door had even finished its chime. Uncle Saul glanced up from wrapping a client's hands. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," Rylan mumbled. "Just school." Saul didn't push. He gave a single nod, then motioned toward the training mats. "Work it out. That's their purpose." Rylan said nothing more, just changed his clothes, stepped onto the mat, and began striking the pads as if they had personally offended him. Hooks, counters, pivots, each movement clean, swift, precise. He felt no need to boast about his capabilities. He only needed to remind himself of the one who taught him to never let fury take the lead. But one minor incident in the cafeteria starts a domino effect Rylan never intended to trigger. That cafeteria exchange should have been inconsequential, a foolish remark, a swift insult, one of those things forgotten by the next class period. But for Dexter Corbin, it was never about the joke. It was about the response, or the utter lack of one. Rylan hadn't seemed intimidated, he hadn't even flinched, he had simply departed. And that fact unsettled Dexter. By Friday, Rylan's name was being tossed around the locker rooms. "That new guy has a chip on his shoulder," someone remarked. "He never talks, just glares," they said, as if it were a transgression. During physical education, Rylan was assigned to partner with Dexter for basketball exercises. The coach bellowed the pairings, and the boys formed lines. Rylan didn't react when Dexter threw the ball at his chest with a little too much force. "Let's go, Croft. Show me your skills." Rylan dribbled the ball once, twice. "We're just passing, correct?" "Yeah, just passing." Dexter assumed a relaxed posture, but when Rylan threw it back, he sent the ball like a snapshot straight into Dexter's chest, a perfect strike. The sound echoed. Dexter blinked, and the other boys snickered. "Wow," someone murmured. Dexter forced a tight grin. "All right, cool." And that was the moment he concluded he despised Rylan. After that, the harassment grew more childish, cutting comments in the hallway, chewing gum found inside Rylan's locker. On one occasion, someone tripped him near the drink machines. Rylan never fought back, never reported it, he just kept going. But silence in a school like Northwood was like fuel, and Dexter was holding a match. Lunchtime transformed into a performance. Dexter would hurl loud insults in Rylan's direction from the other side of the room. "You're from Ridgeway, right? Did you bring your body armor or did you leave it at home?" His table erupted in laughter. A few students looked uneasy, but none intervened. Rylan just stared at his sandwich. One of the boys at Dexter's table, Nate Ferris, leaned in. "Man, I think he might genuinely be unhinged. Look at him, he doesn't even react." "He's not unhinged," Dexter retorted, his voice carrying across the space. "He's just another cautionary tale waiting to unfold." That one burrowed under Rylan's defenses. After school, he walked to the bus stop with a bit more urgency. He knew how these situations could escalate. He had witnessed it, been near it, but this time it registered as personal. At home, Uncle Saul observed the tightness in Rylan's jaw. "You're bottling something up." Rylan gave a slow nod. "Trying to." Saul put down his coffee cup. "Sometimes holding it in is more difficult than letting it fly. You understand what I'm saying?" "Yeah. You're not in that place to educate anyone. You're there to get your diploma, to create a future." "I know." Saul held his gaze for a long moment. "But if somebody forces you into a corner, you don't allow them to trample you either." Rylan didn't reply. He didn't need to. Back at school, the gossip began to mutate. A fresh story started to circulate, that Rylan had a criminal history, that he was expelled from his last school, that he had assaulted a teacher in middle school. Not a word of it was true, but nobody seemed to care. In history class, Dexter leaned forward from the seat behind him. "Have you ever witnessed a real fight, Croft?" Rylan didn't turn. "Yeah, I mean a close one? Not on a screen, the kind with blood on the ground." Rylan finally glanced back over his shoulder. "You don't want that kind." Dexter smirked. "Is that a threat?" "It's a piece of advice." That smile faltered, just for a second. But the following day, Dexter made his move. He intercepted Rylan outside the gym after sixth period. Rylan had his earbuds in, walking toward the rear parking area where the late buses idled. Dexter and two of his friends trailed him silently. "Yo, Croft." Rylan turned, removing an earbud. "You think you're tough?" "No, you act like it." "I act like I want to be left alone." "You don't get to decide that." Rylan's shoulders grew taut. Are you finished? Dexter stepped one pace closer. Not yet. The bell shrieked behind them, and the hallway flooded with students and noise, but this moment remained suspended in time. But Dexter doesn't realize he's pushing on something that has been conditioned not to break, but to strike. The next day was a Friday. A bitter wind sliced across the Northwood parking lot as students hurried toward their buses and cars. Rylan lingered, helping Mr. Chen, the custodian, stack some old desks near a side exit. He wasn't trying to curry favor, he just wanted to avoid the throng. But Dexter had planned it that way. By the time Rylan emerged from behind the gym, the lot was nearly deserted. Just a handful of cars, no teachers in sight. Dexter was standing by the dumpsters with Nate and Zane, all three of them holding that falsely casual stance, hands tucked in pockets, as if they were just killing time. Rylan saw them and continued walking, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his stride unwavering. "Hey!" Dexter called out. Rylan halted about 10 feet from them. "What? You think you're clever or something? Just blowing me off every time I talk to you. I didn't come here for you." Dexter advanced a step. "You didn't come here at all. You were dumped here." Rylan's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Nate began to circle to his side slowly. Zane leaned against the wall, chewing gum as if he weren't part of something illicit. "I want to understand what makes you so damn special," Dexter said. "You walk around like you're above everyone else, sitting alone, staring at people. I'm just handling my own affairs." "No, you're disrespecting mine." Rylan looked him straight in the eye. "You have something you need to prove? Then prove it." That's when Nate made his move. He lunged forward with a clumsy shove to Rylan's chest. It wasn't skilled, it wasn't trained, it was pure aggression. Rylan didn't move an inch. He didn't retaliate. "Back up," he said, his voice low. Dexter laughed. "Go on, Nate." Nate lunged again, this time throwing a wild punch aimed at Rylan's shoulder. It never landed because Rylan had already closed the distance, one twist, one sweep, and Nate hit the pavement with a loud smack that echoed. "What the?" Zane started, but he never finished the thought. Rylan turned his gaze to Dexter. "Don't." But Dexter couldn't back down now. He charged, aiming high, believing his superior size would power the blow. But size was irrelevant here. Rylan slipped beneath the punch, pivoted, and drove his elbow into Dexter's ribs with just enough force to make him stagger. Zane backed away. "Yo, chill, man." The entire confrontation lasted maybe 12 seconds. Dexter was on the ground, down on one knee, gasping for air. Nate sat propped against the dumpster, his eyes wide with shock. Zane had his hands raised as if he had just seen a man lift a car. Rylan didn't celebrate, he didn't mock, he just stood there. And that's when Mr. Davies, the assistant principal, rounded the corner. "What is going on here?" Dexter scrambled upright. "He attacked us." Rylan looked at him. "Are you serious?" "I didn't do anything, man. He's insane." Mr. Davies glanced at Rylan, then at the other boys. He saw no blood, no bruises, just tension and fear, but not the kind he anticipated. Rylan's hands were steady, his breathing was even. He appeared more composed than any of them. "Come with me," Davies commanded. They walked to the office in complete silence. Not a single word was spoken in the waiting area. Rylan sat opposite Dexter. Nate had already phoned his father. Zane said nothing at all. Dexter kept muttering under his breath. "He's finished. He's so done." Rylan didn't even acknowledge him. Inside the principal's office, Mr. Davies studied Rylan for a long, hard moment. "Do you want to tell me what occurred?" Rylan did. Calmly, directly, without lies or embellishments. Davies listened, then he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're fortunate no one is bleeding." Rylan didn't reply. "You are aware that we have a zero-tolerance policy, right?" "I didn't initiate it." Davies sighed. "It doesn't matter who initiates it. What matters is who concludes it." Rylan stared at the desk. Then perhaps you should be speaking to the ones who never attempted to stop it. Davies blinked for a second, just a brief pause. He was at a loss for words. But when the situation calms and a teacher arrives, Rylan is not leaving as a hero. By Monday, everyone at Northwood High knew the fight had detonated into a storm of whispers and sideways looks. Rylan couldn't walk down a corridor without someone moving aside, not from respect, but from apprehension. He was no longer the quiet new student. He was something different now, something to be watched. In first period, the boy who usually sat behind him chose another desk. During lunch, no one spoke when Rylan entered. No taunts, no remarks, just silence. But this silence felt more deafening than any noise. He claimed his usual seat at the back, placed his tray down, and ate by himself, just like before. But it was different now. Now they weren't just overlooking him, they were actively avoiding him. Across the cafeteria, Dexter sat at a packed table, recounting the incident as if he were the aggrieved party. "The dude's a psycho," Dexter said. "He came at us like something from a movie. Swept Nate's legs out from under him, like he's some kind of martial arts master. Nobody does that unless they've been in actual fights." Zane remained silent. Nate was absent that day. One girl at the table arched an eyebrow. "But didn't you guys surround him?" Dexter retorted sharply. "No. We were just talking, and he lost it." She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't challenge him. In gym class, Rylan wasn't paired with anyone. Coach Miller just instructed him to shadow the drills for the day. No explanation, no forewarning, just a command. Rylan didn't protest. After school, he skipped the gym. He took the extended route home instead, walking past the neighborhood market, then ducking through an alley he hadn't used since he arrived. He needed time, he needed space, a place to process. At home, Uncle Saul was watching a replay of an old MMA match. Rylan let his bag fall by the door and collapsed onto the sofa. "Tough day?" Saul inquired. "People are acting differently now. You expected them to be thankful?" "No. I just didn't expect them to look at me like I'm a threat." Saul switched off the television. "Listen. When you defend yourself and you win, people see power, and power frightens the weak, especially the ones who talk the loudest." Rylan stared at the floor. "I didn't even go all out. I held back." "I know you did. But that doesn't matter to them, because you revealed something about that boy, and he isn't prepared to face it. What should I do now?" "You keep your composure. You remember your purpose for being there." Rylan didn't respond, because in his heart, a part of him wished he had gone harder. At school, things only became more surreal. A few teachers gave him those long, searching glances. One school counselor even summoned him for a check-in. "I just want to ensure you're settling in properly," she said. "I know transferring mid-semester can be challenging." Rylan nodded. She smiled, a little too forced. "Do you ever experience feelings of anger?" He just stared at her. "Why?" "No particular reason. Just checking." He stood up and walked out before she could complete her next question. That evening, a post appeared on social media, a grainy image of the fight behind the gym. The caption read, "He thinks he's in a movie. Scared yet?" It was posted from one of Dexter's anonymous accounts. The comments were a mix. "Yo, he dropped Nate like a ton of bricks. Don't mess with that guy. No, something's off about him. Why is he even here if he's going to behave like that?" Rylan read every single word. Not just once, not just twice, but enough times to feel a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't ashamed of his actions, but the narrative was no longer his to control. The next morning, he entered the school and noticed 2 security guards positioned by the main entrance. They weren't always there. In homeroom, the principal's voice crackled through the intercom. "All students involved in last week's altercation are currently under review. A formal hearing will be conducted this Thursday." Rylan showed no reaction. He just stared directly ahead. A hearing. Now it was being made official. But the storm isn't over, not until Dexter attempts to rewrite the narrative. Dexter Corbin was unaccustomed to losing. Not on the football field, not in the classroom, and certainly not in front of an audience. That confrontation behind the gym had bruised more than his ribs, it had bruised his reputation. And for someone like Dexter, that was a more severe injury than any physical blow. So he did what people of his kind always do when they lose their grip: he lied. It began with quiet words to teachers, offhand remarks about feeling unsafe in Rylan's presence. Then the rumors started to spread. Rylan had been expelled from 2 other schools before Northwood. He had once shattered someone's nose in middle school. He kept a knife in his backpack. None of it was true, and none of it was questioned. The video Dexter had posted continued to be shared. It was blurry and brief, edited to cut off just before Nate threw the first punch. But in those few clipped seconds, Rylan appeared to be the aggressor, calm, methodical, dangerous. Dexter added captions. "Watch his movements. That's not normal." He included hashtags, #threat at Northwood, #Schuldbeer. The comments took on a more sinister tone. "He's not one of us. He probably learned that in juvie. Expel him before something worse occurs." Rylan saw it all. He never responded, he never posted a rebuttal. But silence has its own price. That Tuesday, his mother received a call from the school. By Wednesday, a formal hearing had been set with the district administration. Rylan was required to attend with a parent or guardian. Saul took the day off from work. Inside the conference room, the walls were bare. A large rectangular table occupied the center. On one side sat the principal, Mr. Davies, a school board representative, and the director of student discipline. On the other side were Rylan, Saul, and a folder containing statements Saul had insisted Rylan write down, just in case. Dexter was not present. He didn't need to be. His version of events was already hanging in the air. Davies cleared his throat. "We have had a number of concerns raised by students, staff, and parents. It is our duty to ascertain whether Rylan Croft presents an ongoing risk to the safety of our student body." Saul leaned forward. "My nephew is not a risk. He is trained in self-defense. He was not looking for a confrontation. He attempted to walk away. He gave them a warning." The board member peered over his glasses. "Is it true that he has received combat training?" Saul did not hesitate. "Yes. But training does not equate to violence. It equates to control. It means understanding how not to injure someone." One of the assistant principals interjected. "There is a video circulating. We do not see what initiated the altercation." "But of course you don't," Saul cut in. "Because it has been edited." They fell silent. Rylan finally spoke. "They cornered me. I did not throw the first punch. I didn't even want to be there. And yet," the board member said, tapping the folder before him, "we have reports of you being involved in an act of physical aggression. So what was I supposed to do?" Rylan asked, his voice calm but resolute. "Let them assault me?" Silence once more. Saul sat back. "This isn't just about a fight. It's about your perception of my nephew. You saw a large, quiet, black young man who defended himself and immediately assumed he had to be the problem." Davies looked uncomfortable. The board member jotted something down on his legal pad. The decision was postponed. They required more time. Outside, Saul let out a slow breath. "You handled that well. It doesn't feel like it. They listened to you. They may not acknowledge it, but they did." That evening, Rylan had little appetite. He sat on the back steps, gazing up at the night sky. Everything felt inverted. He had done the right thing, and yet somehow, he was still the one being scrutinized. He wondered if there was even a correct way to exist. But the true turning point arrives from a source Rylan least expects. Thursday morning was thick with tension. The decision from the hearing had not been announced, but everyone at Northwood moved as if it had been. Rylan felt it the instant he walked through the doors. He was no longer a student. He was a topic of discussion, a rumor in sneakers. He drifted through the hallways like a ghost, present but disconnected. Some students stared, some whispered, others simply averted their eyes. By lunchtime, his usual table in the back felt even more desolate than usual. Rylan toyed with his food. He was halfway through an apple when someone slid into the seat across from him. It was a fair-skinned girl with short auburn hair and large glasses, quiet. Rylan recognized her from a few of his classes. She always carried a sketchbook, always kept to herself. Her name was Sienna Reed. She didn't greet him. She leaned forward and whispered, "I saw the whole thing." Rylan blinked. "What?" "Behind the gym. I was there. I didn't intend to be. I was sketching the dumpsters for an art assignment. I stayed silent because, well, I didn't want to be pulled into it. But this hearing is not fair." Rylan stared at her. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because if they expel you because of Dexter's lie, I'm just as much to blame for not speaking out." Rylan hesitated, uncertain if he could even trust her. "You're not just playing a game with me?" "No," she said, her eyes unwavering. "I've already spoken to the assistant principal. I'll be at the follow-up hearing." That night, when Saul returned home from the gym, Rylan told him everything. "She's going to testify?" "Yeah." "Do you trust her?" "I don't know. But she seemed sincere." Saul nodded. "Sometimes, the right people stay silent until the price of that silence becomes too great." Friday's follow-up hearing had a different atmosphere. Sienna sat at the far end of the long table, her hands folded in her lap. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were crystal clear. "They cornered him, 3 against 1. Nate threw the first punch. Rylan was only defending himself. He told them to back away more than once. I witnessed it all." The dynamic in the room shifted. Even Davies paused in his note-taking. "And you said nothing until now?" the board member inquired. Sienna shook her head. "I was afraid. But that's not a valid excuse." Her voice broke, just a little, at the end. They were dismissed from the room. After another 15 minutes of deliberation, Rylan and Saul walked out into the parking lot, the winter wind biting at their jackets. "She didn't have to do that," Rylan said. "No," Saul replied. "But she did." The official verdict arrived via email the following morning. Rylan Croft is not subject to disciplinary action. The school acknowledges evidence indicating he acted in self-defense. Saul printed it out and taped it to the refrigerator. But even with the hearing concluded, Rylan knew things at school weren't simply resolved. The following week was quieter. No sarcastic remarks, no shoves. Dexter did not speak to him. He didn't even meet his gaze. Nate came back to school, kept his head down. Zane switched lunch tables permanently. One afternoon, as Rylan was placing his books into his locker, Sienna walked by. She didn't say a word, just lifted a hand in a small wave and continued on her way. He smiled, just slightly. Not everything required words. But the atmosphere had changed, not just for Rylan, but throughout the school. He noticed 2 freshmen defending a kid who was being taunted outside the gym. He saw a teacher actually intervene when a student made a snide comment in class. Small changes, nothing monumental, but they were present. But even after receiving justice, Rylan is left with something heavier than bruises. The final bell of the semester rang, and just like that, the hallways were once again inundated with noise. Backpacks were thrown over shoulders, lockers were slammed shut, and conversations about winter break bounced off the walls. But for Rylan Croft, none of it felt ordinary. He lingered by his locker longer than necessary, allowing the tide of students to flow past him. There was no more hearing, no more threats, no more whispers. But peace? That was an entirely different matter. He had weathered the storm, but weathering a storm doesn't always equate to healing. Ms. Albright, his English teacher, stopped him as he was about to leave. "Hey Rylan, wait up for a moment." He turned. "Yeah? We're holding a student-led assembly tomorrow. One of the speakers had to back out, and a few of us were thinking, maybe you'd consider saying a few words?" He froze. "Like speak in front of the entire school?" She smiled warmly. Only if you're comfortable with it. I just believe people need to hear from you, not the version of you that's been circulating." Rylan didn't reply, just gave a single nod and walked away. That night he sat on the floor of his bedroom with a blank notepad in front of him, a pen in his hand. He stared at the empty page for almost an hour. Then he wrote a single sentence: "I didn't ask to be here, but I'm not leaving either." The next morning, the auditorium was filled to capacity. The lights were dim, the students were fidgety. Teachers stood along the back wall, their arms crossed. Rylan waited in the wings until his name was called. He walked slowly to the microphone. No notes, no script, just his voice. "I've been called a lot of things since I arrived here. Quiet. Strange. Dangerous. Some of you probably still don't know what to think of me." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the audience. "I didn't come here to pick a fight with anyone. I came here to graduate from high school. I wanted what every other person wants, to get through my day without any trouble." He looked around the room. The silence was palpable, but they were listening. "I'm not going to stand here and claim I'm perfect. I've made errors. I've been angry. I've been hurt. But if the only narrative you know about me is the one somebody else told you, then you never really knew me at all." The gymnasium was still. "I'm not from this place. I'm from a city where keeping your head down is how you survive, where you learn very early when to speak up and when to stay quiet. And here I've had to learn that sometimes silence just encourages people to talk louder." He paused, then nodded toward the teachers. "I'm thankful for those who listened. And for those who didn't. I'm still here. You couldn't drive me away." Somewhere in the middle rows, Sienna sat watching. She didn't stir, just listened, her expression unreadable. Rylan looked up one last time. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't be so fast to put labels on people. You have no idea what they've endured, what burdens they've had to carry. And maybe the next time, instead of laughing, or pushing, or posting something fake, maybe just try asking." He stepped away from the mic, which clicked as it went silent. At first, there was no applause, just stillness. Then a single person clapped, then another, and then it spread, not a wild or dramatic ovation, just a genuine one. That day, something fractured and opened up at Northwood High. Not everyone was transformed, but a few were. And sometimes, that's enough to begin something new. Later that afternoon, as Rylan was crossing the courtyard, a younger student stopped him. "Did you really train to fight?" Rylan shrugged. "I trained to stay prepared." The kid smiled. "Can you teach me?" Rylan considered it for a moment. "Are you sure you want to learn? It's not about hurting people." The kid nodded. "I just don't want to feel scared anymore." Rylan smiled, just a little. "All right then. First lesson, stand tall, even when it feels easier to fold." They walked side by side toward the exit gate, not as instructor and pupil, just as two kids figuring out how to move forward. Sometimes, the most difficult battles are not the ones fought with fists, but the ones where you are forced to prove you have a right to be in a world that keeps trying to push you out. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. We have more stories that deserve to be heard.